Mr. President, the TPA bill that we've been debating is going to be good for the country. It will help move our country forward, provide tremendous opportunities for growth and expansion for our farmers, ranchers, businesses, fishermen, workers, those in the high-tech sector. As Senator Portman mentioned, 95% of all global consumers lie outside of the United States. 95%. What we need to do is access those consumers to have more opportunity. Currently, it's estimated that over 38 million jobs in the United States are tied to trade. The trade agreements that we are talking about on the Senate floor that would come after TPA will create hundreds of thousands of new jobs, new opportunities for Americans. And these are good jobs. And we need more jobs. Mr. President, this has been one of the weakest recoveries of any major recession in American history. We are barely growing at 1.5%, 2% GDP growth. These are not traditional levels of American growth. Why? Why is our growth has been so slow? Well, Mr. President, there are many reasons, but I think the overregulation of our economy by the federal government clearly is one of the major reasons. And trade agreements are exactly the kind of boosts that we need. What do trade agreements do? They reduce regulations. They cut red tape. They reduce taxes on goods coming into American families. We need this kind of policy in terms of less regulation, more freedom for our domestic economy and internationally. That's how we're going to get moving again. That's how we're going to get this economy moving again. That's how we're going to get Americans working again. And that's why TPA is so important to begin this process. But TPA is also about American leadership, bipartisan U.S. American leadership. Mr. President, since the end of World War II, every administration, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter, has wanted to lead on trade, has wanted to obtain trade promotion authority. And that's been critical to American leadership, global leadership, helping our businesses and workers. It's also critical to make sure that we have a seat at the table, to set the rules for the global trading regime, as we have traditionally done. Again, bipartisan, Democrats and Republicans for decades have been doing this, and to help make sure that we are leveling the playing field for our workers. Mr. President, the American worker, the American fisherman, the American rancher, the American farmer can compete against anyone in the world with a level playing field. We've done that for decades. That's the American way. But we got to be in the game. We need to be the country setting the rules. We need to be the country that lays out trade agreements that have strong intellectual property rights protection, that open markets, that get rid of state-owned enterprises, that have strong enforcement provisions. So when countries cheat in global trade, we have the ability to enforce rules and strike back if we need to protect our economy, our workers, our farmers, our fishermen. Mr. President, I want to talk a little bit about free trade as it relates to my home state of Alaska. Here are some facts about trade in Alaska. Already, trade in my state of Alaska, there are jobs, over 90,000 jobs tied to trade. That's more than 1 in 5 of all jobs in the Alaska economy are tied to global trade, particularly trade to the Asia-Pacific region. We are also a huge recipient of foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment that employs Alaskans. These are good jobs. 14,000 Alaskans are directly employed by foreign companies, and there are tens of thousands more who are indirectly benefit. So many Alaskans count on these important jobs. In terms of exports, of course, we're a very large state with a relatively small population, little over 700,000 citizens. But in 2013, the state of Alaska exported over $6 billion in goods and services. Mr. President, per capita exports, we are a powerhouse. We are one of the strongest exporters in the country. And in terms of fish and seafood, we are the superpower of exports. Not per capita, but absolute exports. In 2013, we exported roughly $2.3 billion in seafood and fish. You know, Mr. President, it's a very important industry for a lot of states in our country, the fishing industry. But in Alaska, we harvest more than half of all seafood harvested in America come from Alaska's waters. So it's also one of the biggest employers in my state. In fact, it is the biggest employer in my state, even more than some of the resource industries. 78,000 Alaskans are employed in this industry. And these are the epitome of small businesses. Every fishing vessel, when you look at one, is a small business. What do? They take risks. I'm sure some of you have seen The Deadliest Catch. A lot of times they're family-owned. They work hard, and they produce a great product. A great product. King crab, fresh Alaska salmon, a great product. These are classic American small businesses. Which brings me to my amendment, Mr. President. And as my colleague from Ohio mentioned, there's a lot of discussions right now. We sure hope that members of this body are going to have opportunities to present amendments to make the TPA bill stronger. The amendment that I've filed, that I want to offer, is a simple amendment to make a principal negotiating objective under TPA focusing on making sure that members of the fishing community, that American fish, American seafood, have opportunities for more open markets overseas. This will benefit the hard-working fishing families all across America. This amendment will ensure that of the many TPA objectives, this one will be in there. More access to markets, more opportunities for these great American small businesses. And as I mentioned, Mr. President, not only in terms of Alaska is this an important industry, this is a hugely important industry for the United States. In 2013, our country exported over $5.5 billion worth of fish and seafood. The commercial fishing industry in the United States in 2013 employed over 1 million Americans with an income of $32 billion. Let me repeat that. 1 million Americans in this industry, nationwide, $32 billion in income. And again, most of these are classic American small businesses. This is who TPA should be focused on. Now, as I mentioned, Mr. President, the current TPA bill has negotiating objectives for a lot of important industries in our great country: textile, agriculture, services, manufactured goods. There's about 20 specific trading, negotiating objectives that the TPA bill directs the U.S. Trade Representative to get in terms of the free trade agreements he will try to seek once TPA has been passed. And this is the way it should be. Those are all great sectors. Agriculture, hugely important to our country. But we should also have a similar negotiating objective for another very important industry in this country, our seafood industry, the fishing industry. So, Mr. President, this is a simple amendment. It asks that the U.S. trade negotiator focus as a principal objective to make sure this industry has opportunities, just like all the other industries do. And importantly, particularly as we're trying to work through this bill to see what amendments we can get on it. This is a very bipartisan amendment. My Irish friend on the other side, Senator Markey, is a co-sponsor of this bill. Massachusetts certainly has a lot of hard-working fishing families. And so from Alaska to Massachusetts, this is a very bipartisan bill that will help small businesses, bipartisan amendment, and help coastal communities that rely so much on fishing. Finally, Mr. President, I want to talk about TPA and go back to the issue of American leadership. TPA and open trade, free trade agreements can work for America. They can work for our workers, farmers, businesses, ranchers, fishermen. I know, I've had the opportunity of seeing this firsthand. I worked as an Assistant Secretary of State under Condoleezza Rice on economic issues, on trade issues, and a number of the free trade agreements that we currently have in force were ones that I had the opportunity to work on with many members in the federal government. Let me give you two examples. The free trade agreement we had with Singapore and the free trade agreement we had with Australia. Once these were passed and the barriers to our exports came down, American exports skyrocketed to these countries. As I mentioned, American workers can compete with anyone. Give us a level playing field, and we'll take advantage of it. U.S. exports in terms of goods to Australia rose 33% between 2004 and 2009. U.S. goods exports to Singapore were up $21 billion, 31% from 2003-2009. I met with the Singapore ambassador today. He reminded me that we actually have a trade surplus with Singapore, as I believe we do with Australia, because of these free trade agreements. So free trade agreements are a win-win for our country economically, but they also, importantly, deepen the economic ties that bind our country and our citizens to some of our most important friends and allies, like the country of Singapore, like the country of Australia. And Mr. President, that is happening. Finally, though, trade is also about American leadership. It's about American confidence, the ability to say, open the markets, we can compete with anyone. And Mr. President, we need that confidence back. For too long, under this administration, we have been disengaged from the world. For too long, we've allowed other countries to be in the driver's seat globally. Where we've not been driving events, we've been reacting to events internationally. For too long, we've been withdrawing. For too long, we've been leading from behind. And for too long, we have not been showing confidence globally. We've been showing weakness. And weakness is provocative. And you see that all over the world. Now, I've been critical of this administration's approach to foreign policy in a whole host of areas. Its foreign policy of global disengagement, its lack of confidence in American leadership in the world. But I applaud the president for what he's doing now. I applaud the president for his strategy of rebalancing a focus of military forces and trade in the Asia-Pacific. And I applaud the president for doing the hard work of seeking TPA. These are never easy votes. These are never easy votes. But we should support what he's doing because it means that America's back. We're engaging again. We're not leading from behind. We're leading the way countless administrations in the past have done with regard to global trade. This will enable us to determine our future to drive it, not react to it. I urge my colleagues to vote for this TPA bill because it's a vote for American leadership. I also urge my colleagues to vote for the amendment that's going to help many, many small businesses throughout the United States and coastal communities, our strong fishing communities. My amendment will strengthen the TPA bill, and I encourage all my colleagues to support that amendment as well. Mr. President, I yield the floor.